Anthropic's Claude is AI backed by uncompromising integrity. Claude is run by responsible leadership who have an ethical approach to the development of AI while providing strong data security and putting humanity first. Whether you're brainstorming alone or building with a team, Claude can help you do your best work securely. Discover how Claude can transform your work and business at anthropic.com/Claude or find Claude on Apple and Android app stores.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya guselkumab, taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clearer at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
At T. Rowe Price, our curiosity lights the way to help you plan ahead for what matters to you most. Work directly with us, and together, we can help uncover the right investments for you at every stage of your life, whatever your goals. That's the power of curiosity. Better questions, better outcomes. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Visit troweprice.com/investdirect to learn more.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Americans are durable. We take pride in hard work and high quality. American Giant makes durable quality clothing right here in the USA because what we wear reflects who we are. When you buy American Giant, you're not just wearing the best clothes money can buy. You're helping keep jobs and pride in your own backyard. Premium clothing built to last decades, like it should. Get 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with code RightHere24.
Sam.
Dougie.
Welcome back to The Truth, ladies and gentlemen. Huge episode for your consumption today. Today we are talking about whether La Masia, Barcelona's fabled academy, is back.
Well, the Sriel and Riley still going. Look at this, Kevin. It's a brilliant run from Messi. Will he go all the way? But it's Messi. It's Iniesta! Messi spots the run of Xavi!
Did you know that Barcelona are having one of their best ever starts in La Liga? And they're doing it with lots of shiny La Masia graduates.
It's Lamine Yamal, and Barcelona have the lead.
And Gavi is there to put Barcelona ahead.
Swept in for the second goal of the game for Fermin Lopez.
How about this burst of pace from Alex Balde?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, great to have you on board for another episode. Sam, you're back from the dead. Are you feeling a little bit better?
A bit better, yeah. Well enough to do the podcast. Thank you for accepting my request for a 2-day delay due to COVID. I thought we were done with this. I didn't realise this was still a thing. I know lots of people have had it multiple times. I hadn't had it once since, the initial 2020 thing. So this has been a bit of a blast from the past in all the wrong ways, actually. But we're back. And I'm very excited for the episode. I'm sure everybody is, except maybe Real Madrid fans.
Well, maybe they'll learn something about their biggest rivals. I hadn't actually clocked that it was COVID. Bad luck. But yeah, it's great to have you on board. And we've got a man that always adds a lot of energy and knowledge. Mr. Jack Collins, how are we doing, Jack?
I'm good, thank you, Dougie. I'm surprised that I've had COVID about 7 times. So the fact that Sam hasn't had it since 2020 has really taken me aback. I've had it, at least once a year, post-Glastonbury runs, all of it. But I suppose it's what happens when you're out in the wide world.
Absolutely, living a busy life. And you know what is busy at the moment? La Masia. It has been churning out world-class or approaching world-class youngsters for a number of years now. And it felt like after a slight dip in its performance in the 2010s, it is well and truly back. And Hansi Flick's Barcelona are going from strength to strength, with those homegrown academy graduates really being the propelling forces behind it. So on today's episode, we're going to explain what is La Masia, first of all. How does it work? What are they looking for then? Why did it take a little bit of a dip, if at all? Why is it back? And yeah, why is Flick such a fan of it and the players that it's producing at the moment? And why it was so necessary for it to return to its very best as well, with all the financial shenanigans that have been going on at Barcelona for a long, long time. But first of all, Sam, let's set the scene. What is La Masia? Give them maybe a little brief outlook of the sort of history of the place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like you guys can correct me if you feel like this is wrong, but for me, I guess it's personal experience. La Masia is like the first academy that I think I ever called by its name. So it's got a very interesting place in kind of my personal history of football, and I think for a lot of people too. It was so overwhelmingly successful for a period of time and churned out such high quality players year on year, which we'll get to soon, that it actually was called by its actual name. It wasn't just called the Barca Academy. It wasn't just called Barcelona's academy setup. It actually got named by English people, by people across the world. We used the Spanish or Catalan term for it, La Masia, which is testament to how strong it was. Because since then, yes, we'll say we'll drop Cobham into a conversation very, very easily. You know, when talking about Chelsea's academy. But I think before La Masia, I don't think we did this. Maybe generations previous did, but we're all roughly the same generation. And I did not do this for anybody other than Barcelona.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. I think it's a very good point as well. And it has become sort of, well, for so long, it was seen as the sort of gold standard of academies, and for very good reason as well. You know, it was first built, you know, it was originally a structure, a sort of farmhouse, and that's what La Masia literally translates as in Catalan. And it was built in the 1700s, but by the end of the 20th century, it was really key to Barcelona finally winning their first Champions League in 1992. And then I would say the years 2005 to 2015 are kind of dominated by Barcelona and the success that that side had under first Pep Guardiola, or first Frank Rijkaard, I should say, actually, and then Pep Guardiola taking it on and a succession of coaches after that. And it was with La Masia graduates at the core of it as well. You know, Van Gaal was famously ridiculed for stating that his dream was winning the Champions League with 11 homegrown players, and Guardiola came pretty close.
He wasn't far off, was he? Oh my God. I didn't know that he'd said that, because, you know, counting through that side, that between, you know, 2008 and 2011 for Barcelona, I mean, it was the vast majority, wasn't it? We've got at least 8 or 9 names on our lists here that have all come through the academy to some degree. Some more than others as well. Like, maybe we should set out at the start, like, the definition of an academy player can be a touchy subject. UEFA or FIFA will often define it as 3 years in an academy setup before turning 18. And that's about good enough for most people. But there are some borderline cases, and some people will say that you need to have been in that La Masia academy since you were 4 or 5 or just starting to walk or whatever it is. And Pep Guardiola once said, a player who has passed through La Masia has something different to the rest. It's a plus that can only come from having competed in a Barcelona shirt from the time that you were a child. Child, operative word there. That rules out Pedro. Pedro was not in the Barcelona academy for very long. And Pedri is not a La Masia graduate either. He was bought from Las Palmas at like age 17. He couldn't be further from it. He's from about as from La Masia as I am, roughly speaking. But for the most part, there's a whole massive list of players that have been churned out over the decades. And even if they haven't hit the top level, even if they've only hit the middle levels, or they've just, you know, managed to find a way into competitive football, which for many people that work in the game of football, that is the definition of a successful academy, just getting players into professional football. They do not have to be world beaters. You just need to get them into the professional setup. Barcelona have churned out an absolutely ridiculous number of players. And La Masia is very helpful in that. Obviously, initially, I think, or until very recently, last 10 years, it was, yes, a training complex, but it was also a dormitory for a lot of players that came from afar. And I remember, reading Graham Hunter's book about Barcelona, and the chapter about Andres Iniesta is called The Boy from Albacete. Iniesta is not from Barcelona, he's from elsewhere, but they were able to import lots of players from across the country and take them into the academy and house them and teach them about life and teach them about football. And when people say the Barca way and things like that, they don't just mean football. It can be a bit uppity, a bit sniffy sometimes, but they kind of mean a bit more. And that's because they were probably one of the first academies to really rake in so many players from so far away at times and give them that all-encompassing experience. And that's probably why they all play so similarly and so beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a shared identity is something that Barcelona and Spanish football more generally are really proud of. And I think, it's so attached to Catalan identity and Barcelona's feeling of sort of otherness in Spain as well. And I think having that academy that has created so many greats over the years is something they are quite rightly enormously proud of. I think some of the highlights really, we've already touched on Pep Guardiola winning the Champions League with, I think, 8 La Masia graduates in his starting 11, or used on the day, I should say. Another highlight, November 2012, Barcelona fielded 11 players from La Masia against Levante. The 3 finalists in the 2010 Ballon d'Or all came through the famous academy. You talk about Puyol, Balde, Guardiola, of course, himself as well. And now it has, they've changed site for now as well, but it's still a huge part of what the club is trying to do. It houses 80 athletes across Barcelona's youth ranks, which is not just football as well. It also houses their young basketball players and handball players as well. There's a school inside it. They do their exams there. Lamine Yamal was studying there throughout the build up to the Euros. And they also provide a lot of psychological services, because these are the best players in their region, or often the best players in their region in the entirety of Spain as well, who aren't used to competing against other players of similar or better level than them as well. So, articles I was reading in preparation for this were pointing out that psychological services to let people give the players the tools really to deal with the fact that they aren't necessarily the best in their age group anymore is absolutely crucial. In terms of what Barcelona kind of look for in a player, Sam, and maybe you kind of covered this in your research as well, but what do you think Barcelona look for when they are bringing people to La Masia? And why do you think that Barcelona have used it to such a different effect to Real Madrid in particular? Because Real Madrid, it feels like they make stars to sell, whereas Barcelona, it felt like, at least for the vast majority of the last 20 years, it's making players for that starting 11.
Well, I don't know if they just ultimately wanted to paint themselves as the complete opposite to Real Madrid. In many ways, of course, as they always do, the old arch rivals. But we've got this situation where Real Madrid have long been thought of and long been known as a team who buys stars, a team who construct Galactico teams, and tried to incorporate Ronaldo and Bale, tries to incorporate some of the great, picking up a Figo, a Zidane and a Beckham, and trying to put them all in the same team and making it work. They're almost polar opposites and clashing and butting heads in terms of, from a philosophical point of view as well, which is quite fitting given how serious that rivalry is across Spanish football. But Barca always felt like they were trying to train a particular type of player. Again, for those that are, only been watching football for the last 5-10 years, will probably think, well, this doesn't sound very special, because, when I sit here and say, well, Barcelona were, playing the Cruyff school of football and playing, total Dutch football, and, from an early age, teaching players to pass out from the back and play their way out of trouble and never go long, and they were creating 5'8" technical playmakers left, right and centre. And, even the centre-backs, most of them were actually on the small side. Carlos Puyol wasn't actually that big. He seemed big because of the way he threw his weight around, but he wasn't actually that tall. That all sounds fairly normal now. Like most clubs across Europe are trying to create and try to develop technical players. But Barca were doing it 40 years ago at a time when it absolutely wasn't being done by most others. Not everyone, I have to say. Like, obviously, Ajax has stayed true to a school of play as well. But they broke the mold in so many ways, I think. And watching them create and develop these players over and over has been fascinating. Although I will say that, in my 10 years or so in the industry, I've probably tried too hard to find the next Iniesta in a player that never was going to be that player. Jack and I have fallen foul of a few fallen crowns, I guess we should say. Carlos Alenia, Ricky Puig didn't quite become the players that we wanted them to be.
All very good footballers. Let's just be very clear.
Absolutely. I mean, geez, Ricky Puig in particular, obviously tearing up MLS and stuff. But there's some big shadows that have been cast at La Masia in the last 20 years or so. And they have tried to churn out technical players. And to a point, I think maybe they've been caught up a little bit. And maybe as we go into the fallow period that we're going to talk about, we can say that actually some of it is just down to competition in a way that they did not have that before. But if you think of a Barcelona academy player, like I just say, just think of an unnamed 17-year-old Barcelona. What is he or she? They are a very tricky 5'7" pirouetting attacking midfielder who can turn on a dime and see a pass that no one else can, and that's their hallmark. That's them.
Yeah, absolutely. Pure sort of technical excellence, comfort in the ball, as you say, picking up the ball in any position as well, and a kind of calmness when so much of the game right now is played at such a ferocious pace. It always felt like the peak Barcelona players and the best La Masia graduates just saw the game so much earlier than everyone else around them.
Just one thing on the history of it. And actually, I think it's really interesting you say this because you speak about the kind of differences between Barcelona and Real Madrid. And actually, La Fábrica, which is Real Madrid's academy and farm system is I think it's how it's described, which isn't a great phrase for any sort of footballer, really. But they did have some real homegrown talent come through, 70s and 80s in particular. The Quinta del Buitre, which it was the name given to 5 Real Madrid youth graduates based around Emilio Butragueño, whose nickname was El Buitre, which means the vulture, I think. It was him, Manolo Sanchez, Rafael Vázquez, Michel, and Miguel Pardeza. And all of those, Pardeza was really, really small. Michel was quite big. I think he was the only one of this 5 over 6 foot. And yes, obviously people get taller over the years and I get all that. But Real Madrid did have this capability and did really dial into this in their glory years in the 70s and 80s. And I think it's just important to kind of note that because whilst obviously La Masia has been doing this for some time, it almost felt like it became more prominent as Real Madrid came away from this. And as you mentioned, Sam, they move into that Galacticos era, which is important to remember that they sort of had 2 strands to that as well, right? There was the Galacticos and then they had this homegrown bunch as well, Zidanes and Pavons, they were known as. And it was about kind of like stacking the team with stars and then bringing enough homegrown players through to actually just fill in the gaps, which isn't a great kind of strategy. It's kind of what Inter Miami are doing, to be honest, right now. But you kind of look at where that came from, and it almost felt like the ultra reliance on La Masia from a Barcelona perspective came through as a kind of backlash to Real Madrid coming away from that. And I just thought it was an interesting thing historically that they really kind of drove that home in the 90s and 2000s, just as Real Madrid was starting to actually look elsewhere to become a kind of global icon. That Barcelona felt like they wanted to do that from within. And it's something we've discussed about Athletic Club in Bilbao and their kind of Basque identity. I do think that La Masia helped to ground Barcelona back into that Catalan identity in a time where Real Madrid were going like hyper global.
Yeah, and I think this sort of touches upon one of the lessons I think we need to keep in mind whenever we talk about strategy in Spanish football is like often when you ask why things change from this to that, or change so drastically from this direction to that direction, the answer is often about, well, they change presidents. And different presidents have different ideas for these big clubs. And Barcelona are no strangers to this whatsoever through their history, and Real Madrid won't be either. And through the years, you can have a big club like this, an elite club, acting in a completely different way to it was 5 or 10 years ago. Because somebody else is calling the shots. Somebody else has a different vision for these teams. And Barcelona, we will talk about them fading in and out of incredible years of usage of the academy. And one of the common denominators is who's president. And that will also be the case affecting Real Madrid and Barcelona and their sort of undulating approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like Real Madrid for so long have used their academy in a slightly different way, as we've already touched upon. And, it was interesting to see a November 2023 study by the International Centre of Sports Studies, what a catchy name that is. But they said that Real Madrid, they did all the calculations, Real Madrid had created the most amount of players playing in Europe's top 5 leagues than any other club, with 44. And it felt like for a time, Barcelona's sort of quality in that mid-2000s side kind of stopped the next generation coming through. There was almost the fact that Xavi and Iniesta and Messi were so dominant, and Puyol and Pique, players like Pique and Fabregas had to go away and sort of learn their trade at other clubs. And Pique was brought back very early. Fabregas obviously came back much more in his prime. But Fabregas has spoken about the fact that he had to leave as a 16-year-old in 2003 because he saw the players ahead of him who were also La Masia graduates, who were also, fiercely proud to be Barcelona players and wanted the best for them and the club. But they just saw that there was just a roadblock in their way of other talent. And between 2010 and I'd say 2019, it felt like only one academy graduate really established himself at Barcelona, and that was Sergio Roberto, who, no disrespect to Sergio Roberto, but won't go down as an all-time Barcelona great in the way that the previous generation of graduates did. And loads of other La Masia graduates in that time, be that Munir or Christian Tello or Sandro Ramirez or Rafinha, these are all perfectly good players, but they weren't of the Barcelona level of the previous 10 years. And so they had to leave to go and get football elsewhere. And it also was quite interesting reading about the report or the talks that Aurélie Altamira had with a number of new newspapers in the last couple of years. Now, he's a former director of La Masia, and he said that the pipeline slightly broke in that period, and that above the under-19s is Barcelona B. And Barcelona B is like the equivalent of the reserve side for a British side. And that is where Pep Guardiola first managed and then, made the pathway over to the first team. He had that side with Busquets in and Pedro, which then graduated to the first team. And Altamira at that time said that in the 2010s, they were signing players for Barcelona B. They were signing players that were sort of veterans at that stage already that were never going to make it into the first 11. So you saw players like Eric Garcia, like Xavi Simons, like Sergio Gomez, like Dani Olmo, who was brought back to the club this summer, all choosing to leave Barcelona at that time because of the decision-making of a number of sporting directors that changed dramatically in that time. They had 11 sporting directors, or they have had 11 sporting directors between Pep Guardiola's departure and now, which is Deco. Wow. And so many different ideas about what should be a Barcelona player, the importance of the academy, what the sort of overall plan is for the club. And it just felt like for a decade or so, or maybe just under, Sam, that La Masia sort of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the list of players by, you can kind of go back through from birth year and track the sort of successful periods and not. And basically all of the guys that graduated, it was eight players in 8 years, not all in successive years, some in clusters, but 8 in the space of 8 years that went through the academy: Puyol, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, Messi, Pedro, Victor Valdez and Gerard Pique, and they all won the Champions League as major parts of those teams. That is a phenomenal hit rate. Absolutely phenomenal. And then following that, so the youngest of those players is Sergio Busquets, who was born in 1988. And if you take the academy graduates from 1988 through for the next 10 years, you're looking at Sergio Roberto, as you said, a very reliable squad presence, and almost nothing else. So there's a bunch here. Cesc obviously left really early. So he was
Jordi Alba was in that group as well, didn't he? He left.
He left really early. So Alba left for Valencia. Cesc went to Arsenal. Thiago Alcantara did break into the first team and then just left. He went to Bayern and then Liverpool. You've got guys like De La Feu, Bojan Bartra never quite hit the heights. Hector Bellerin also stepped away very early. Dani Olmo went to Croatia, as you said. Cucurella also left really early. That's very hard to believe that he was brought up at La Masia when you watch him play. He's good, but stylistically doesn't make any sense. And the two kind of Iniesta heir apparents, Puig and Alenya, they kind of flamed out a bit, didn't quite get there. Sergi Samper was very injured and ended up in Japan. But you got a load of players here who either didn't quite get their injuries or whatever. And at the time we were very excited, but you look back and you think, wasn't such a strong group. And a bunch of others who were successful but had to leave the club to do so. There are two reasons for that, in my opinion. The first, as you say, is they're looking into the first team squad and they're going, how the hell am I supposed to get into this team when I'm a number 8 and I've got Andres Iniesta in front of me? Or this was towards the end of the Pep era. So Pep finishes up 2011, finishes the Champions League 2011, 2012 doesn't quite work out, and they start to cycle through managers. And I think they become acutely aware that they have this ridiculous generation of players. They have changed football for a lot of people. An entire generation of people have watched Barcelona and seen football in a completely different light, and they are rightly interested and potentially borderline obsessed with remaining on top of the pile and remaining Barcelona as we thought of them back at that time. And so they start like trying to maximize this window. You've got the best player in the world, Lionel Messi. You've got this this godly, like incredible academy batch. Let's add quality to it. And for the most part, it doesn't really work out. Like obviously Neymar is brilliant and they win the Champions League again in 2015. But there is a whole period of time here where there is some absolute shockers of transfers, and they are shelling out so much money on players as they try to maximize this window. So how are you supposed to come through, and where is the pipeline when year on year, 2017, Ousmane Dembele, 105 million plus 40 million. 2018, Coutinho, 105 million plus 40. 2019, Antoine Griezmann, 120 million. And that, like, do you want to go further? Malcolm, 40 million. Andre Gomes, 40 odd million. Paulinho, 40 million. Nelson Semedo, 30 million. Artur. Like, these are all cursed transfers. This is hundreds of millions of pounds.
Paulinho was all right.
Yeah, he was all right. This is hundreds of millions of pounds worth of drain, right down the drain. It's just gone. And as Iniesta started to fade and Xavi left and Busquets, they never replaced them properly. They tried. They spent a lot of money in attempting to do so. And I think they did that aggressively rather than lean on the academy to a point, because they were like, well, we need to get the most out of Messi. Messi will not last forever. Let's get as many Champions Leagues as we can. What if we could get 6 in a decade? And Real Madrid ended up doing it instead. It didn't work out at all. But this is obviously damaging. And while we can sit there and look back and go, well, these players, De Deulofeu, Sergio Roberto, Rafinha, didn't mention him, Christian Teo, Bartra, they weren't that good. Also, there was no pathway. So maybe things would have changed. That's not me saying that they're all world-class players that have been wronged. But you get what I mean. Maybe the pathway wasn't quite there, and they became victims of their own approach, which was an obsession with staying on top and being willing to spend a genuinely ridiculous amount of money, a criminal amount of money, in order to try and stay there when really they'd be better off doing something else.
Yeah, for sure. It felt like as an observer, someone just needed to take away their credit card at that particular time, because they weren't doing any good for themselves or their future with it at that particular time.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya guselkumab, taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clearer at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information, at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Americans are durable. We take pride in hard work and high quality. American Giant makes durable quality clothing right here in the USA, because what we wear reflects who we are. When you buy American Giant, you're not just wearing the best clothes money can buy. You're helping keep jobs and pride in your own backyard. Premium clothing built to last decades, like it should. Get 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with code RightHere24.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley's small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Hey parents, Greenlight is here to take one big thing off your to-do list, teaching your kids about money. With a Greenlight debit card and money app of their own, kids and teens learn to earn, save, and invest. You can send money instantly, set flexible controls, and get real-time notifications of your kids' money activity. Set up chores and put allowance on autopilot to reward them for their hard work. Then, learn about the world of money together. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.
What was quite interesting as well was hearing Xavi, when he took over, complaining that the actual methods of La Masia had changed actually during that time as well. So Pep Segura was their sporting director, one of the 11 that I mentioned between 2017 and 2019. And according to reports, he was absolutely obsessed with the idea of marrying amazing technical skill, of course, but also physical strength, and just thought that was going to be the unbeatable combination, which to be fair, I was about to say, in some ways, like Pep Guardiola with the current City side, it feels like they are kind of doing that, to be fair. But when Xavi took over in December 2021, he complained that juego de posición, excuse my Spanish accent, had really gone out of fashion at La Masia, and he almost was shocked by the lack of understanding from the academy graduates coming through in the kind of basic Barcelona way, as it were. But of course, I think a huge factor in the return, or whether La Masia is back, is obviously the financial situation created by the failed signings that Sam already indicated. At the start of the pandemic, Barcelona's wage bill was 700 million euros per year. Real Madrid's was around 400 million euros. The debt at Barcelona, which is estimated to be around 3 billion euros now, was absolutely massive. The year that Barcelona sold Neymar for 222 million euros, they made a 32 million euro profit. That was how much they were spending on their wage bill at the time. They, of course, then needed to refinance or finance this new stadium. They've obviously sold television rights. They've sold Barcelona studios or part of Barcelona studios. They've made all sorts of wacky ideas to try and continue spending. And, you mentioned the kind of blockbuster signings that they made during that period. They've almost still carried on doing it, just at a lesser scale in the last few years. Lewandowski, Koundé, Rafinha, Ferran Torres. Debatable whether, particularly in Ferran Torres' case, whether that's been a good signing whatsoever as well. But there's no doubt that they had to tighten their belts and they had to look to the academy. And luckily, Sam, some absolute gems have come through.
Yes, they have. I mean, look, again, I'm a bit worried about over-egging this, but like some of the players that we are now watching come through, it's starting to feel a bit like that period again at times. Like that's how excited I am about probably 2 or 3 of them, maybe not 8. Although again, it must be said that those eight players came over the course of 8 years. So if we start seeing more and more pop through at Barcelona in the next couple of years, then add it to the list, and it will start to look a bit like that crop. But it kind of started probably with Ansu Fati. Was that the hallmark first name back in?
I think
there was so much excitement about his arrival, wasn't there?
And that hasn't obviously worked out. And I'm more than willing to say that it's largely down to injuries, and it is just a big shame. But for those of you that don't remember, because it was like 4 years ago now, that's how long Ansu Fati has been around, and that's how long he's been struggling. But his synergy with Lionel Messi when in on the pitch when he first broke into the Barcelona first team was absolutely sensational at 17 years of age, at 16. Like, Messi trusted him with the ball and wanted to combine with him, and that's how you know he's a good player. Like, all you need to identify a good player, you just need to look at who Messi clearly rates on the pitch. It's really easy scouting. And Messi thought Fati was great and wanted to pass him the ball. All right, Fati's a great player. They got to watch him then, and he was. And it hasn't quite come through, unfortunately. And he came through he was born in 2002, and so since then, Alejandro Balde has stepped into the frame and had his injury problems, but has emerged as a very good left back. Fermin is very good. Gavi is amazing, obviously, and Pau Cubarsi, who has been a 2024 revelation, looks like he has it all. And I was really interested to see Szczesny's comments upon returning from retirement. Unretiring? To answer the call for Barcelona. He said he assumed that Cubarsi was going to be soft. Just looking at him, he thought he'd be soft. Maybe that was because he'd seen pictures of him, or maybe that was because he assumed that Barcelona defenders would be, no steel. It would be fancy, but no steel. And he's pleasantly surprised. He says he's hard as nails. And he's brilliant on the ball. Wins all of his duels. Does everything well. Absolutely brilliant. So some incredible names coming through here. And finally, again, I think you're probably right to try not to give Barcelona too much credit here. It's not like they've been lapping these opportunities up, is it? It's not that they were like, we're desperate to get these academy players into the team. They've still been trying to burn money on a bonfire. It's been quite frustrating to watch at times. But the ones that have seeped through, it's starting to look really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the brightest, Lamine Yamal as well. I feel like, I was on...
Yeah, I left him for you, don't worry.
Oh, fair. Yeah, I was on ranks earlier this week with Jack, and I had him 5th on my Ballon d'Or for this year. And I think it was probably a little bit of a crazy shout because the Ballon d'Or is not 2024 only. It's the start of 23-24, as we discussed on that episode. But his 2024 has been right up there with anyone in world football. And his impact at the Euros, young player of the tournament, arguably should have been player of the tournament, goal of the tournament. He's just been absolutely phenomenal. And it feels like now that Flick has an abundance of options now in a squad that had been scratched together at various points under Koeman and Xavi. And that is really thanks to La Masia. It's really beefed out that squad. He now has 11 La Masia graduates in his first team squad, which includes Dani Olmo, who they re-signed this summer for 55 million euros, who looked absolutely sensational prior to injury, which was really, really unfortunate. But I think it's a little bit unfair just to give this all the credit to Flick, because Xavi gave 16 debuts to youth players in 2.5 years, and he was constantly bigging up the academy during his time there. He said that the key difference between the current 21st century graduates and his generation was that they are just completely fearless compared to his, which, given the way that him and Iniesta played on the ball, I didn't think they were lacking in any sort of balls as it goes, or any sort of cojones. But it's absolutely remarkable the standard of player that's coming through at La Masia right now. And I know, Jack, you've been absolutely wowed by their talent. And where do you think these La Masia graduates can take this team?
I mean, it comes back to your point. How far are they going to trust them? Like, we got a generation here who look really talented and look exceptional in many ways. And I think you're right, Sam. It does feel like Ansu Fati was the first one to really make that break. You kind of look at the generations, and obviously you mentioned Fermin, but Marc Casado is of his generation as well. There's a couple that they've already sold on who are starting to look like really, really good players. Ana Martinez was one of them. But you look at Casado, you look at Bernal, and this season we've started to see games for Hector Fort as well, which is an interesting one. And seeing him slip into this side, they just look ready. And maybe that's because we've become accustomed to Barcelona being a little bit dysfunctional over the past few years. And it's still weird, I think, watching a Barcelona's team look dysfunctional when they were the zenith of everything good about football, when we were in the kind of prime age to kind of be wowed, if you will. But I think that if they are given the faith of their manager, and look, there is a really difficult line to balance here, because you don't want to run players into the ground when they're this young. You don't want to overload them. But equally, with someone like Lamine Yamal, for example, he just feels like you can't drop him, because whilst he's playing a lot of games, and I'm a little bit worried about how many games he's playing, every time he comes onto a pitch, he looks magic. And it's just, there's no question of, is Lamine Yamal ready? There doesn't feel like there's any of that. And I think this is it. And it probably points to what Xavi was saying there, Dougie, that actually when these players step in, they don't look like they're wowed or overawed by the situation. And sometimes you see that with players who jump up from youth levels to senior level. I think the B team helps with this. And it's a structure that obviously is very different to those who only watch, let's say, English football. But the fact that the B teams play senior football lower down the pyramid in Spain, gives them an opportunity to play at a high level, obviously lower down than what they'll be playing in La Liga, but also at senior football in full contact, if you will, rather than under 21 football, which is somehow appears, I think, a little bit softer in some regards. But look, Hector Fort looks like he belongs at this level already. Bernal obviously went through that unfortunate injury, but Casado, who is his midfield partner for a while, is really, really excellent and looks very comfortable there. And Pedri's already come out and spoke about Casado and been like, yeah, I love playing next to him. I'm enjoying that. But you kind of worry that Frankie de Jong is just coming back from injury, and Frankie is a much beloved person on this podcast, right? We love Frankie across the kind of have done always across ranks. But I am a little bit concerned that limits the opportunities for Casado, because he's just come in and made a good impression and been excellent. And suddenly he looks like he now might lose his place in this midfield. And I think that's a real shame. But it is important to keep rotating these players in and out. And it's like I say, it's a hard line to balance. But I think that there is, as we say, there's 2 or 3 of this crop in Cubarsi and Yamal who you think, well, they're immediately going to be successes. I think Alex Balde is already past that point in terms of we know he's going to be a success. Then you're coming to Casado, to Fermin, and all of these players look like they've been born ready to walk into this Barcelona team and represent it. If they're given the opportunities, and they continue to be given the opportunities, and Barcelona don't go and spend ludicrous amounts on the next player that takes their fancy, then I don't see any reason why these players, maybe they don't reach the very heights of the game for Barcelona, but still reach a very, very good level of football, that are playing European football, that are playing competitive top level La Liga football for their entire careers. And that's an exciting place to be, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like there's a really nice blend in this squad as well, with some of the experience, obviously a player like Lewandowski to guide them as well. Someone like Jules Koundé, who's been successful for Sevilla for a number of years prior to that, fully capped, multiple caps for France. Someone like Inigo Martinez and his experience. And then kind of the storylines of the season, I think, in Rafinha as well, who's sort of perpetual motion and just pure work rate and unbelievable skill has really sort of turned around the doubters that really were there in the first 18 months of his Barcelona career, maybe even a little bit more. So things are looking pretty rosy for Barcelona, Sam. I mean, in terms of final thoughts and whether La Masia is back, it feels back, but do you think that this came about almost by accident? They were forced into it by the financial situation rather than any glorious plan?
Look, there's an element of that. And I've been quite critical of Barcelona last couple of years for in my view, I think they've embarrassed themselves a few times on the world stage with regard to their finances and their behaviour. And I think there was a time a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, where a neutral like myself may get shouted at for saying that sort of stuff by Barcelona fans. But I think actually now most Barca fans just nod in kind of grim agreement that everyone's come around to the idea that they've not really run the club very well. And so from one perspective, they've kind of fallen into it. But at the same time, they haven't done so willingly. Like, I can't escape the feeling that they haven't actually utilised the academy as much as they could have done, which is mad to say when you reel off those statistics about how many debuts from La Masia that Xavi awarded, and of course how many players Hansi Flick is using from the academy too. Just a thought, which is that for Hansi Flick, the fact that these players are so young and, as Xavi would say, so fearless, is a huge strength for him based on his style of play. And the fact that they may need to be rotated in and out of the team is no bad thing either when you consider the intensity with which Hansi Flick's Barcelona play at. And I think La Liga is a league that typically is a bit slower and a bit more possession-based. And if you do come in with a very full frontal kind of like high-pressing, aggressive philosophy, it can actually really turn things upside down. And I think we've seen that already with Barcelona's 8 wins from 9 games. But most importantly, their PPDA, their presses per defensive action, the figure is so low. It's 6.78 on Understat. So for those that don't understand what that means, that's roughly, so Barcelona are able to break up play so frequently that they typically only allow their opponents 6.78 passes in a sequence before a tackle goes in, an interception goes in. Like at the bottom of the table, just to be clear, in terms of the other end of the scope, Atletico Madrid are allowing 19. So Barcelona are effectively 3 times more active in their defensive actions and their pressuring than even Atletico Madrid, which is quite something. And you can't really do that with old, slow players, but you can do it with young, skilled, but vibrant footballers like the ones that Hansi Flick is unleashing. And if you need to sort of bring them in for 60 minutes at a time and back out again, that is no problem. That is how you make a high-pressing strategy last for a whole season. So don't have the same concerns that Jack does about not being able to see Casado quite as frequently as he wants to. In fact, I think it's a bit of a blessing for Flick.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, they are on an absolute roll at the moment, Barcelona. A couple of blips throughout the season so far, but I think most people saw when they saw Mbappe go to Real Madrid, they thought, here we go, this team's going to be very, very difficult to stop. And so far, Real Madrid look a little bit ragged, and it's Barcelona with these youngsters powering them all the way that look like one of, if not the best side in Europe at the moment. And they've got some big tests coming up in the next few weeks, of course, and we'll see where they are at. But guys, that has been our discussion about whether La Masia is back. We've kind of decided that it is, but maybe through kind of accident rather than any great plan. But Jack, thank you very much as ever.
Thank you, Dougie. It was a pleasure.
It was great. And Sam, on your deathbed as alive, you didn't sound dying at all. A lot of energy. It was great to hear you from you.
That's one bottle of cough medicine just before the record. That's what I'll do for you.
Perfect. Well, best of luck with the recovery, Sam. And guys, thank you so much for listening. Remember to listen, subscribe, share with all your friends, etc. And we will catch you next week. Bye-bye.
See ya, truthers.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clear at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
Hey parents, Greenlight is here to take one big thing off your to-do list, teaching your kids about money. With a Greenlight debit card and money app of their own, kids and teens learn to earn, save, and invest. You can send money instantly, set flexible controls, and get real-time notifications of your kids' money activity. Set up chores and put allowance on autopilot to reward them for their hard work. Then, learn about the world of money together. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley's small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.